You can achieve a lot of things, you can keep growing, 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 but then you have to know when to become small. You have to know when to let other people lead you or to show you the way because you don't know everything, right? So having that humbleness is also very necessary. Lanka nisichar nikar nivasa, iha kaha sajjan karvasa, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lalwani Lounge. I'm your host, Ajay Lalwani, and today we are in conversation with Dr. Mosam Amin. So, we know that Ramayana is one of the two major epics of Bharata's Itihasa, which is India's ancient history, and it dates back to 11,500 BCE. The Ramayana was originally written by sage Valmiki in Sanskritam, and then it was later translated by Tulsidas into Avadi in a scripture called Ramcharitmanas. This Kanda describes Hanuman's life journey and his learnings, and hopefully we can learn something from it as well. So enjoy the episode. Hello, Mosam. How are you? Thank you for flying in for this episode, and I'm actually very excited for this episode. I don't know if you know this, but I've been trying to have an episode on Hanumanji for the longest time. So I'm very glad that you made this trip and we can make this episode happen. Thank you once again.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. I can never take enough time to talk about Hanumanji, so I love this episode. I'm sure it's going to be great.
Perfect, perfect. I don't know if you can see it on my face. I'm like very excited for this. So consider me a student in this episode, and you kind of would be like my sutradhar, the narrator for the whole learning process. So where would you like to start?
Well, initially, if we want to start about an episode about Hanumanji, then we should start with a prayer to Hanumanji. But Hanumanji is happy with the prayer to Ram. So I would like to start with the prayer to Ram, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedase Raghunathaya Nathaya Sitaya Pate Namaha. Let's start with Jai Shri Ram.
Okay. I literally got goosebumps. Thank you for that. Okay. Continue.
Yeah, so let's start with Sundar Kanda because Sundar Kanda is part of the Ramcharitmanas, and I've actually brought the little Sundar Kanda book with me. This is what I keep with me. So Tulsidas has written Ramayan into Ramcharitmanas. So originally it was written by Valmiki and it was called Ramayan and it was written in Sanskrit. Tulsidas is also known as the reincarnation or Avtara of Valmiki, and there is a story behind it. We can get into that if needed. But Ramcharitmanas is written in Avdi and it is written in 7 different parts. Fifth part of Ramcharitmanas is Sundarkand, and Sundarkand is all about Hanumanji and the story where he takes the ring of Ram to Lanka to show Sita ji that Ram is gonna come and take you from Lanka and everything's gonna be okay. And whatever he did, whatever we learn about Hanumanji is through Sundarkand. So Sundarkand has made a huge impact on me. And I would like to talk about that and Hanumanji and the teachings from there.
Sure, let's go for it.
Yeah. So before Sundarkand, whenever we do start Sundarkand, we start from the end chapter of Kishkindakand. Kishkindakand is where all the Vanaras are just there and they have got the message from Sampati. Sampati was the bird who said that I could see that Sita is in Lanka and she's waiting for Ram to come pick her up because she was kidnapped by Ravana, those of you who don't know. So Sampati said, I'm old. I can see that she's there, but I cannot fly there. So in the Vanara group, if you have anybody who can fly there and get the message to Sita and fly back, that would be awesome. So then in Kishkindakan, you see that all the Vanaras are there and saying, oh, I can cross this ocean. I can go to maybe 200 Gaon and come back. Some say, oh, I can go the whole Gaon and may never come back, like Angad, right? Angad was Bali's son. And he said, hey, I can actually go all the way to Lanka, but I doubt if I can make it back, right? So it starts there and Reachpati, they say Reachpati is Jambuwant, right? Jambuwant is the oldest of all and he's there, he's listening to all the Vanaras, all the young Vanaras saying, I can go, I can come back, this and that. And then he fixes his gaze on Hanuman, and Hanuman is just sitting there doing Ram, Ram, Ram. His chanting is going on. And he looks at Hanuman and he says, in Kishkinda Kand, they say, Kahi reach pati sunu Hanumana, ka chupasadi rahe balwana, meaning you are balwan, right? You have all this strength. Why are you quiet, right? And this is where all our generation should learn from it, right? The youth is always about talking, talking, talking. Oh, I can do this, I can do that. I have this much strength, I have power, I have fame, I have money, this and that. But no one has actually taught us to be quiet when we have all that, right? And we learned that from Hanumanji, and I have learned that from Hanumanji that no matter what you have, first be humble enough to be quiet and listen to what everybody else has to say, right? So he's just sitting there chanting Ram, Ram, Ram. Where Reechpati says, Kahai Reechpati Sunu Hanumana, Kachu Pasadi Rahe Balwana. Then he goes into praising him. He starts saying, Pavan Tanay Bal Pavana Samana, Buddhi Vivek Vigyan Nidhana. Kavana Sokaj Katina Jagamahi, Jonai Hoi Tatu Dumpai. Meaning, Pavan Tanay, you're the son of Pavan, you're the son of wind. You have the power of wind, right? Like we know the power of wind when we have tornadoes and hurricanes and it can uproot the houses and trees and whatever, right? So he says you have the strength of Pavan, you have the strength of wind, and you're still quiet. Why are you quiet? You have buddhi, you have wisdom, you have vivek. Vivek meaning you can understand what is good from the bad, right? You can have buddhi, but some people might not even have the vivek, so then there's no point to it. You have vigyan, you have the science. He is the scholarly person who knows everything, right? So you have the strength, you have the buddhi, you have everything. Why are you quiet? And he's still sitting there quietly, Ram, 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 Ram. Then Jambavant is thinking, he's like, I complimented this guy everything I could, right? And he's still quiet. Then he thinks and he says, Ram kaj lagi tava avatara. And then Tulsidas writes, Sunata hi bhayu parvatakara, right? Like he was just sitting there quietly. And as soon as he said, your birth was for the purpose of Ram's deeds, right? You're here to do the work of Ram. As soon as he said that, Jamban said that, Hanumanji got up and he looked like the whole mountain, right? And Jamban was like, oh, whoa. He was just sitting there quietly. And as soon as I mentioned Ram's name, he's just into that Parvatakara, right? And then he started singing out, meaning he started roaring like a lion. And then he's like, Jamban, I can drink this whole ocean. I can make it so dry that all the Vanaras could just walk to Lanka. That would be fine. Or I could just go to Lanka, finish the army of Ravana, finish Ravana right away. And Trikut Upari, I can take the Trikut. Lanka was 3 mountains, right? I can take the whole Trikut, bring it here, and then you guys can decide whatever you want to do, right? And then after saying all that about what he's capable of doing, he looks at Jamawant. He's like, oh, I said a little bit too much that, I could do. He looks at Jamawant and he realizes this is the second thing that we should learn. He realizes that he said a lot about himself. And then he said, Jamawant me puchahu kohi uchita sikhavanu dijahu. Right? Meaning, Jamawant, you're the oldest person here. You are more experienced. Tell me what should I do? And then Jamawant tells him whatever. So the second thing that I learned from Hanumanji from that is that yes, you're capable of doing a lot of things. You know your own capabilities, and you should be self-confident and have that self-esteem of doing whatever. But ask the experienced person. And by Jamawant, I don't mean an older person. I just mean an experienced person who have done this before or who have lived the life before that you want to live, right? So ask an experienced person what we should do, right? And then go from there. But also, Jamwan says, Itana karo tatu tum jai, Sita dekhu karo suduai, right? Like you just go give the message to Sita and come back. Hanumanji thinks he's like, well, if I go to Lanka and meet with Sita, I also want to meet with Ravan. I also want to do other things, right? So another thing I learned is yes, take the advice from the experienced, but do what is the best for you because you know what is best for you, right? But doesn't mean that you make the decision that from ego, right? Listen to people's opinion, listen to people's experience, analyze from the data that you've collected and make the best decision for you because nobody can make that decision for you. And there's no right decision or wrong decision. Whatever decision you make is going to end up happening the way it was supposed to happen, right? Because everything is pre-written. We can get into that too. But so that is another thing that we learn from Kishkinda Kand. And then we go into Sundarkand. So we can go into different dohas of Sundarkand for sure. But one of the biggest lessons that you learn from Hanumanji is that over and over in Sundarkand, you'll hear they say, Hriday Rakhi Kosalpur Raja, Bar Bar Raghubir Sambhari, right? So what it means is whatever work he does, wherever he goes, the first thing he thinks about is Ram, right? So we're all here, we're all going to be doing our work. The first thing that we always have to keep in mind is think about Ram, have the name, right? This is Kalyug, right? And Kalyug, the name chanting is the one of the biggest weapon we can use to go across, right? So Ram Nam is something that has to be always there. And I'm not saying just Ram Nam, it could be any Nam, but for Hanumanji, it is Ram Nam, right? Another thing you will hear over and over again in Sundarkand is Atila Guru Padareu Pavanasuta, right? Atila Guru, meaning he becomes very small. He can become very big, but then he knows how to become small. You can achieve a lot of things, you can keep growing, 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 but then you have to know when to become small. You have to know when to let other people lead you or to show you the way because you don't know everything, right? So having that humbleness is also very necessary. So this is a little introduction of Hanumanji and Sundarkand.
I love it. I love it. So I did read parts of Sundarkand back in the day. One of the things that popped up immediately is when you were talking about some of the experience. So Jamwant also had the experience of going around the world multiple times with the previous incarnation of the Lord in some I think Vamana avatar. Yeah. So yes, I understand. Like if somebody's done this so many times, and right now he may be like according to Kishkindakan or Sundakan, he is actually old, so he cannot make that flight anymore. But he does have the experience and the learnings, so he can definitely help. So understanding that is a very important part.
I would say that is his humbleness that he says that he is old and he can't go. Jamawant is Jamawant. I'm pretty sure he can go and come back, but he sees all these young generations saying, I can do this and I can do that. Because he is experienced and old, he wants to give the younger generation the chance to prove themselves, right? So part of something that older generation should learn is you've done everything you could in your youth, right? Now let this new youth do what they're capable of doing. Find out who's capable of doing what, and then use that to guide them into the right direction. So he guided Hanuman in the right direction. He was the one who actually showed Hanuman who he was. Hanumanji forgot who he was. So
Right.
he was the one who introduced himself to himself. He's like, Hanuman, you have these strengths. You have, you could do this. So I think part of what older generation should do is look at the younger generation, put a mirror in front of them and show them their strengths and abilities and praise them and push them in that forward zone. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Would you like to take us forward into the whole journey into Lanka?
Yeah.
Or, sure.
Yeah,
Right,
we
let's
can
do-
we
let's-
can
let's do
definitely do that.
Let's do that.
So yes, definitely we can get into Sundarkand. So after Jamawant introduces Hanuman to himself, shows the mirror, Hanuman says, Jamawant ke bachan subhai, suni Hanumant hriday ati bhai, tab lagi mohi par khyo tum pai, right? Meaning when a Jamawant says that this is who you are, Hanuman, your birth is to do Ram's Kaj. Go ahead and do what is asked of you to do, right? And Hanuman thanks him for showing him the mirror. And then he gets into this whole zone. He gets into this whole mountain body and he's like preparing himself to go to Lanka. Right now it's a 400 Gao. I forgot what Gao in a distance mean, but I think it's more than 800 kilometers or things like that. It's a whole ocean that he has to go through, right? So the Tulsidas writes that he gets on top of a mountain and he says, Bar bar raghubir sambhari tarke upavan tanay balbhai, right? So he goes on top of Hanuman. He goes on top of the mountain and he's thinking about Ram over and over again, right? Because if you want Hanuman to do something, you have to remind him about Ram, right? So Jambat is like, think about Ram, think about Mata Sita, think about Mata Anjani, right? And he's getting all pile of erection. He's thinking about everybody and he's getting all these emotions and he's gathering his strength and he's ready to take off, right? And more like a jumbo jet just flying through as he takes off. Tulsidas, right? Jimmy Amoga Ragupati Karbana, Ehi Bhati Chaleu Hanumana, right? So like Amog Ban. Amog Ban was something that Ram had, which means that that Ban, meaning if you give the work to this Ban, it will go do the work and come back, right? So similar to Amog Bana, Hanumanta took over and went from one mountain to Lanka, right? And we'll talk about the journey that he's on. But as he takes off, they say Jehi Giri Charana Dei Hanumanta Chaleo Soga Patal Turanta, right? Jehi Giri, the Parvat, the mountain that he was standing on, that Parvat went to Patal. It went right below the earth, right? Because he went with that much force. So then he's gone, and all the trees and stones and whatever you want to think of got uprooted and got into the ocean because he was going with so much force. And then as he was going, all the Devi Devtas were thinking, they're like, oh, he's going for Ramkaj, let's test him, right? So first they tested him with Maya, right? They showed him the Menak Parvat, right? Menak Parvat where he can rest, he can have all the leisure that you can think about, right? You want to think about Las Vegas, casinos, whatever you want to think about, right? Menak Parvat had all the leisures available. So the Devta presented Menak Parvat to Hanuman and said, I know that you're going for Ramkaj, but this is a long journey and we're gonna be tired. Let's use this parvat, let's use this mountain to just rest and have some good time, and then you can continue with your journey. Nobody's stopping you. So this is something else that we have to learn from that episode as well. He doesn't say no, 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 I can't do this, or he doesn't accept that okay, I should rest and do whatever. He simply touches it and says, thank you for the offer, but no thank you, right? So this is something else because when you're living in this generation, in this era, there's a lot of distraction, there's a lot of bad things that we think is good, right? And I've heard this somewhere where they say way to heaven is through hell, but way through hell is through heaven, right? So what we consider heaven is bars and clubs and parties and this and that, but that is gonna not lead to the right destiny that we want to go to. But if we want to isolate ourselves from that, we will end up to heaven, right? So he says, I appreciate the offer, but no, thank you. So then he says, without Ram's work, there's no Vishrama for me. There's no rest for me. So I have to continue with my journey. So he continues his journey. Then he meets Sursa. Sursa was another snake that, Devta has just let out there so that they can test Hanuman again. And Sursa is like, oh, it looks like God has been very happy with me and now they've sent me an ahara, a food, right? And Hanuman says, Mata, right? And Hanumanji, the best quality about Hanumanji is he's so humble, right? He denotes everybody with so much respect and so much honor. So he says, Mata, I'm sorry, but I have to do the Ram Kaj. I cannot be your food right now. But I promise, as soon as I finish Ram Kaj, I'll come back and I will go into your mouth without you even asking me for it. And she says, no, I want to eat you right now. So she opens her mouth. And Hanmaji is thinking, he's like, okay, well, then she's not gonna let me go. So then he makes his body bigger, right? And Tulsidas, right? Just as Sursa badanu badawa, ta sudunu kapi roop dekhava, right? The the more she was increasing her mouth size, the double the size Hanumanji was making himself to be, right? And then she became Satyajoj, and she became the highest that she could be. Hanumanji was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't have her make her mouth bigger and then I get bigger and then she gets bigger. Like, this is something that we keep doing, right? It's the ego clash. Oh, you got this. Well, guess what? You have Mercedes. I got BMW. Well, I got BMW. Or you got Lamborghini. Like the race. So he's like, I'm not gonna keep up with this race because I have to do the Ram Kaj, right? So he then takes Atila Guru Pavan Sutalina, right? Again, he becomes very small. So what he does is, because her mouth was so big, he became very small. He got into her mouth, came out from her ear, and said, Mata, I kept my promise. I got into her mouth and I came out. Now can I please go? And Sursa says, I knew that you were very smart, but I didn't know you were this smart, right? And then she gives her blessings and she goes, whatever Ram Kaj you have to do, you have my blessings that it will be successful for sure. And this is another thing that Hanuman keeps doing. He gets blessings from everybody. He goes to everybody. He shows his humble self. No matter what he has, he's still very humble, and people keeps blessing him. And then he goes, then there's another obstacle that he has to face in the ocean. That there's another Rakshas in there, where she would look at the reflection of any bird or any creature on the ocean and she would kill them. So Hanuman killed her, and then he got to Lanka, and then he looks at Lanka. But what I want to get to it is there is three different distractions or obstacles that he had to face before finishing the Ram Kaj, right? So no matter what work we start with good intention, right? When you start Sundarkand, you'll hear Hanuman Dada says, "Hoi he kaju moi harasubisesa," right? He says, my heart is content. I'm very excited. I'm thrilled that this is going to be really good, right? And this is the first sign that this work is going to be successful. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be any obstacles. If there's no obstacles, you're not learning, you're not growing. You have to be tested, right? Person who's just sitting there isn't going to be tested, right? Person who's running will be falling and having ditches and things like that. So what we learn is there will be distractions, there will be obstacles, but we have to face it with everything we got. We can't just say, oh, did I make a mistake? Should I have not come to this ocean? Should I have not said to Jamawat that I could have gone to Lanka and do things like that? So keep going. Obstacles will happen, distractions will happen, but you keep your focus. Keep reminding yourself that Ram Kaj lagi mera avatar hai, right? Like Ram Kaj meaning you see Ram in everyone, selfless service. If you look at whole Sundar Kanda Ramayan, you don't see any story associated with Hanuman of his own. There's nothing that Hanuman is getting from anybody. He's just doing Ramkaj. He's just doing things for people. Even in Hanuman Chalisa, you'll say, because of Hanuman, Sugriv met with Ram and he got his kingdom. Because of Hanuman, Vibhishan met with Ram and got Lanka. Because of Hanuman, Ram won at the battlefield with Ravan and got Ayodhya. All Sugriv, Ram, and Vibhishan got the kingdom. Hanuman didn't get anything. But then, so there's an instance, and I'm getting a little sidetracked, but there's an instant where after Vibhishan got Raj Tilak for Lanka, Sugriv got Raj Tilak for his kingdom, and then Ayodhya, where Ram came back to Ayodhya and he got his Raj Tilak, and Hanuman is dancing happily, right? And Ram is like, Hanuman, I got a question for you. Vibhishan got his kingdom, Sugriv got his kingdom, I got my kingdom. Everybody got his kingdom. We're happy. We understand we're happy. Why are you happy? Right? And Hanuman replies, saying, yes, everybody got one kingdom, but I got two kingdoms. And he shows Ram's charan, right? Ram's feet. He's like, this is what I got. That's why I'm happy, right? So if you look at Hanuman's life story, there's nothing that he gets from any of this. He's doing this message to Sita and bringing it back in war, and everything is for Ram. And then he takes the message to Vibhishan and things like that, but that's for Vibhishan, right? So he's a guru. He goes to people, he teaches people whatever he has, he gives people whatever he has. What does Hanuman have? Ram Nam, Ram Katha, right? And that's the only thing we need, right? And that's what he keeps giving people, selfless service and name chanting. That's all he has. And if you look at Hanuman, there's no other deity or god that you would say would have Bal, Buddhi, Vivek, Ashtasiddhi, Navanidhi ke Data. He's the Data of Ashtasiddhi. He doesn't have it. He keeps giving. He doesn't keep anything, right? So even then, he still keeps saying Ram, Ram, and he just doing a selfless service. So I think that's the biggest lesson that we could learn from him, right? And then he gets to the Lanka. Before he gets to Lanka, there's a whole description about what Lanka looks like, right? So Lanka, there's a border of just gold wall, right? And he looks at that. So he's like, let me get on top of a mountain to get a better view. So he gets on top of the mountain and he wants to get a better view of Lanka. So Tulsidas wrote, कनक कोट विचित्र मणिकृत सुंदरायतना घना चौहट्ट हट्ट सुभट्ट बीति चारु पूर्व विधि बना गजबाज खच्चर निकर पदचर रथ बरूथनि को गने बहुरूप निश्चर जूत अति बल सेन बरनत नहीं बरे. Meaning there's gold walls. Before even you go to the castle, there's this border of gold with different kinds of gems that he has never seen before, not just real diamonds, but different kinds of gems that he has never seen before. And he's like, this is amazing, right? And then he gets on top of the mountain and he wants to see a little bit inside about what's happening in the town. He says, there's Banabaga Upabanabatika Sarapupabapi Sohari Naranaga Suragandharva Kanya Roop Munimana Mohari, right? So he sees different kinds of parks that he has never seen before. He sees Nag, he's seen Gandharva Kanyas, he's seen beautiful women that even if Rishi Munis, if they look at her, they'll be attracted towards her, right? Like they were that beautiful. Then he says, Nana Karana Biragi Bahubidi Eka Ekana Tarjani. Then he looks at different kinds of wrestlers, right? And they're, you can look at one and you'll forget about the other one. Like they're so strong and they're actually asking for each other to come do the wrestling with me. And he's like, I've never seen somebody so powerful before, right? And then he sees different kinds of rakshasas and he's never seen these kinds of demons and rakshasas before. So in his head, he's like, this is something that I've never seen before, right? But even when he sees that Hanuman is Hanuman, right? He's just thinking about, he's like, well, how do I go and do Ramkaj? He's thinking, if I go like this, I would have to fight with these people, which I will eventually, because if I'm going, I have this body, I have to warm it up a little bit, but I will. Right now is not the time. What he teaches us is no matter where you go, be humble first. So then again, it goes to Atila Guru, Masak Samana Rupa Kapidhari. Masak is machar, mosquito. He takes a small form like a mosquito and he tries to go through the little gate so nobody would catch him, right? So he's like, I'm just gonna wait till it's the evening time and I'll go inside when it's an evening time so that again it's dark so nobody can see and I'll be like a mosquito so nobody will catch me. So it says masak saman rupa kabitari lanka chale sumiri narhari. Again lanka chale sumiri, by remembering narhari is ram, right? So he's like, Jai Shri Ram, now I'm gonna go Prabhisi and the Lanka. As he goes, Lankini, who is the security in charge of Lanka, catches him. And so first surprise Hanumanji gets is like, so I got caught even though I was in a mosquito form. So that means the security is really tight. Even the mosquito can't pass by, right? So first surprise is, oh, I got caught, so security is really tight. Second surprise he gets is when he turns and he sees a woman. And he's like, oh, security in charge is a woman, right? And so Lankini was the name of that security in charge, and she was the Rakshasi, she was a demon. And she says, Jane nahi marumusat mora mora har jaha lagi chora, meaning my food is chor like you. You don't know about me, you don't know my value. I eat chor like you. And Hanumanji is thinking, he's like, you're calling me chor? Chor is your Lankapati Ravan who stole my Mata Sita and you're calling me chor. So he gets really mad and he says, he punches Lankini. Tulsidas says that he punches Lankini. He might have, right? But what we're trying to think is he's a guru, right? So guru is always somebody who punches you with knowledge, right? So he's saying, you're calling me chor, meaning you don't have enough knowledge to know who's the chor and who's not the chor. In reality, I'm actually trying to find what is already stolen, right? So I'm trying to find Mata Sita. So he punches Lankini and Lankini says, जब रावण ही ब्रह्म बर दीना चलत बिरंची कहा मोई चीना बिकल होसिते कपि के मारे तब जाने सुनि सिचर संगारे तात मोर अति पुण्य बहुता देखयु नयन राम कर दूता, right? She says, when Ravan got that wish from Brahma, when Brahma was leaving, Brahma told Lankini that one day when a Vanar will come and punch you, that day noted down from a month from that day, all the Nisiters, all the demons will be done. Ravan will die, and it will be a different era then, right? So then Hanuman is like, this is perfect. That means you even give me the answer before I could solve the equation, right? Like now I know that we're gonna win this battle, right? And then she says, Tat morati punya bahuta, dekho nayan Rama karduta. Now her knowledge, she gained the knowledge that this is Ramaduta, and she says, it's my honor that I saw Ramdut. And after that, she got this the line that Lankini says is तात स्वर्ग अपवर्ग सुख धैर्य तुला एक अंग तुलनता ही सकल मिली जो सुख लव satsang, right? She says if you take a scale and you weigh two things, on one hand you put swarg, meaning heaven, and more than heaven, you put all the sukh in that scale, and you put love satsang, meaning 12 minutes, 24 minutes of satsang in one way, this will be heavier than this, right? So he says, because of your satsang, I've become a better person. I've seen Ramdut. And then she left Lanka. She's like, now I'm a sannyasi. I got all this. So another thing we learned from Hanumanji is do Ram Katha wherever you go, right? This is what we're doing again here, right? In the podcast, we're doing Ram Katha again. But so that's one thing that happens. And then Lankini says, Prabhisi Nagar ki jay sab kaja, Hriday rakhi Kosalpur Raja, meaning welcome to Lanka, but make sure in your heart you keep Kosalpur Raja. Kosalpur Raja is again Sri Ram, right? So now Hanumanji enters Lanka. He's looking from one mandir to another, trying to look for Mata Sita. He couldn't find her anywhere, right? And then Tulsidas writes, Sayan kiye dekha kapitehi mandir mohana dekhe baidehi, right? He sees Ravan sleeping, but he still couldn't find Sita. Then Tulsidas writes, Rama Yuddha Ankit Grubha Sobha Varani Najai, Nav Tulsi Ka Brundataha Dekhi Harash Kapirai, right? So, in Lanka, he wasn't trying to find anything Ram associated, right? But surprisingly, he finds a mandir that has a Rama Yuddha Ankit Gruha, right? Like the war, when Ram goes on war, he has the bow and arrow. He saws that sign and he's like, oh, well, this is kind of surprising that I see something, associated with Ram. And he sees a Tulsi plant, right? He sees a plant of Tulsi and he gets very happy from the heart. He's like, oh, something is up here, right? So he gets very happy. And then he writes, Lanka Nisichar Nikara Nivasa, Iha Kaha Sajjan Karbasa, right? So yeah, he gets happy and then he's thinking, he's like, but Lanka is where Nisichar lives, right? Um, how am I gonna find a Sajjan person here? How am I gonna find a good person here? And then Vibhishan wakes up from his sleep and he starts chanting Ram, 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 Ram. And so Hanumanji is like, oh, wait, there's something that I need to look at, right? So then he takes a sadhu's avatar. He's like, I don't want to go like a vanar. I'm just gonna become a sadhu because sadhu te hoi na karajhani, right? Because if you look at a sadhu, no matter what sadhu does, they can never do any harm, right? So he's like, I'm just gonna take a sadhu avatar and just go meet Vibhishan and see what it's all about. So he takes this sadhu avatar and he goes to Vibhishan, and Vibhishan is looking at Hanumanji. He doesn't know whether he's Hanumanji, and he's like, uh, who are you, right? Because I'm getting this inner feeling of content, this happiness, this peace, but I can't really tell who you are you some saint, some sadhu mahatma that I know, or are you Ram himself? Because I'm getting this happiness, please introduce yourself. So again, Hanumanji being Hanumanji, he doesn't introduce himself first. He says Ram Katha first, right? So he sings all the Ram Katha, and Vibhishan is like, any devotee, you sing Ram Katha to them, they're always happy. So he's like, oh. And then Hanumanji introduces himself. He's like, I'm Hanuman, right? And Vibhishan says, More Hriday Preeti Ati Hoi, Ki Tum Ram Dino Nuragi, Ayahu Mohe Karan Bad Bhagi, right? You have came to bless me. And then he says, Sunahu Pavan Sutarahni Hamari, Jimmy Dasanai Mo Jeev Bichari, right? He says, listen, Pavan Sut, that's another name of Hanumanji. My life is like a tongue living between 32 teeth, right? You understand? Because the tongue can go between the teeth and get chewed up by the teeth, and the tongue has to be very careful. So he's the only person. Well, we'll know about other people later on, but for now, he's the only person who's saying Ram, Ram, and Ram is the number one enemy of Ravan. This is Ravan's kingdom. You can't say Ram, 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 right? So he's like, the way I live isn't that great, right? So Vibhishan tells his story, and then he says, you binu hari krupa mila hi nahi santa, right? Hanumanji is a param sant, he is a sadhu, right? And he says, without Ram Kripa, without Ram's grace, you can't meet a saint, you can't meet a sadhu. So I'm sure that Ram has his grace on me, that you have came here and you have told me Ram Katha. It's my privilege, right? So and then later on you'll find out how Vibhishan leaves Lanka and he goes to Ramcharan because of everything that Hanuman has said and things like that. But Vibhishan is the first Ram Bhagat that Hanumanji meets when he goes to Lanka. Then Hanumanji is like, Sunu Brata, listen, brother, I've told you the Ram Katha. Now you know that I'm here to look for Mata Sita. Have you seen Mata Sita anywhere? And then Vibhishan says, yes, I have. Let me take you to Ashok Vatika and you can see Mata Sita over there. So he takes Hanumanji to Ashok Vatika, and Hanumanji does his pranam from a distance because this is the first time Mata Sita comes into Sundarkand, right? So he does his pranam. He meets Mata Sita for the very first time. He sees Mata Sita, Krustanu sees Jataye Kubeni, Japati Hriday Raghupati Gunashreni, right? Krustanu sees, meaning she's very petite. She has lost a lot of weight because again, she's in depression and stress and anxiety and whatever you want to call it, right? But she keeps reciting Ram's name. Again, you'll see this over and over again. People are chanting Ram's name. So he sees Mata Sita and he goes on top of the tree where Mata Sita is sitting, and he sees that she keeps reciting Ram's name. Her gaze is fixed on her own feet, but her mind is at Ram's feet, right? So he's looking at Mata Sita. He's like, let me just hide under the leaves at first and see what's going on, and then once I analyze everything, I'll do what I have to do, right? So he's sitting there, he's watching Mata Sita does this thing, and he's getting very sad because she's very depressed, right? And before he can think about doing anything, Ravan comes there with Mandodari, his queen. And he is telling Mata Sita all these things. He's like, oh, look at me. Mata Sita has never looked at Ravan, right? She is a sati. She doesn't look at other men. So she's sitting there, and Ravan is like, look at me once. I'll give you everything you want. This Mandodari, my queen, I'll make her your servant, and all the other queens your servant. I want you to be mine, right? So then Mata Sita Trundhari Ota Kahati Dehi Sumiriya Vadapati Paramasanegi, right? She takes a little, what do you call it? Like a fragment of a leaf, and she just leaves it in front of Ravan and says, I dare you to cross this, right? And this is not going to do anything, but she was like, in my head, it's always going to be Sri Ram, right? And then she says, Sunuda Sumukha Dyoda Prakasa, Kabuhu Kinalini Karai Vikasa, right? She says, you're like a firefly. Usually the fireflies have a little light. Because of that firefly, the lotus isn't going to bloom up. You're going to require a sun, which is Ram. So you are a firefly compared to Ram. And listening to that, he gets very furious. He's like, you're insulting me, Sita, right? So then Sita is like, she talks to Chandrahas. Chandrahas is Ravan's talwar, right? Ravan's sword. And he's like, she says, Chandrahas, please kill me. I want to be out of this agony. I want to be out of this depression because, when depression gets so hard, you're suicidal, right? Basically. So she wants to die. She's like, just please kill me. And when that all happens in the heat of the moment, they say Mandodari actually grabs Ravan and she says, don't kill her right now. I'll make sure that she comes to you. And then she looks at all the Niskicharis, all the Rakshasis out there, and she says, make sure you torture her so much that she actually comes back to Ravan, right? And then they leave. And Sita is just sitting there thinking, if Ram doesn't come in a month or so, these people are gonna kill me. Like my life is ending. And also she is depressed from being separated from Ram. And so she looks at Ashok, and I'm cutting it short. But in the middle there's Trishta, there's another Rakshasi, and she's asking Trishta. Trishta was also a Ram fan, I should say. And she asked Trishta to make a little cheetah where she can go and kill herself. And Trishta is like, I can't do that. And so Sita is thinking, man, I can't even find a way to kill myself. What a misery, right? So then she looks at Ashoka. Ashoka was the tree that she was sitting underneath. And she looks at Ashoka and she says, Satyanam Karu Harumam Ashoka, right? Like, make your name come true. Ashoka means you take away all the sorrows. Make sure you take away all my sorrows. Give me some kind of ignition where I can burn myself, right? And so Hanumanji is watching all this and he's like, this is not right. Right. So then Hanumanji decides to just drop that mudrika, drop that Ram's ring, right? So when he drops that Ram's ring, Sita is like, oh, Ashoka has given me that angara, that ignition that I needed, so I can now kill myself, right? So she goes there to look at the angara. She grabs it and she says, Ramanam Ankita Sundar, right? She sees the ring and it says Ram Nam on it. And she's like, this is Ram's ring. If this was done by through deception or something, it would have been ashes by the time I touch it. But this is an actual Ram ring. So where did this come from? So she gets all happy, but she's also anxious about where did it come from. So then Hanuman Dada starts, and I call him Hanuman Dada, right? In Gujarati, Dada means grandpa, right? So I trust him like that. He's like my Dada. Anyway. So Hanuman Dada starts saying Ram Katha again. So again, Sita, all the sorrows are gone. All the sorrows are always gone when you listen to Ram Katha, right? So Sita is like, oh, I have the Ram Anguti, and I hear the Ram Katha. So she's like, whoever is saying the Ram Katha, show yourself. I want to see you who has seen the beautiful story. I want to see that beautiful face. Hanuman is like, oh, I'm not sure if you want to see this beautiful face, right? So then he jumps down and he comes in front of him, in front of Mata Sita. And Mata Sita actually turns away because she's actually scared of Vanars, right? In the previous Ayodhya accounts, we'll see that Sita is actually scared of Vanar. So Hanuman Dada says, Ramadut mein Matu Janaki. Satya Sapat Karuna Nidhan ki. He's like, I am Ramdut. I'm swearing to Karuna Nidhan, right? I am Ramdut Mata Janaki. Like, don't be afraid of me. So then he convinces her. She understands that this is Ramdut. And remember, he's again in that Masa group. He's a very small group. So he's just standing there saying all these things. And Mata Sita is like, after you're depressed for so long and you get a little ray of hope, you want to tell them everything, right? So she's like, where have you been? Like, I've been thinking, does Ram even think about me? Does he even know that I exist? What have I done? Why did I lose him? I have served him with all my love and devotion and everything. And he's a Karuna Nidhan. He's full of good heart and full of pity and full of everything. Why has he been so hard-hearted with me? Why has he forgotten me? And Hanuman Dada says, well, however much you love Ram, he loves you double, Mata Sita. And then he conveys Ram's message to Mata Sita. And then Mata Sita is a little okay to hear that message from Ram saying that, he's missing her. Um it's a love letter, I should say, where he's like, even the rain feels like it's just burning oil just dropping from the sky and things like that. So she's convinced that he misses her and he's sad. And then Hanuman Dada says, Ab hi maa tumhe jaun lavai, Prabhu aaya sunahi Ram duhai, right? He's like, Mata, Ram didn't know that you were here, otherwise he would have got you. Ab hi maa tumhe jaun lavai. I could take you to Ram right now, but that's not Ram duhai. That's not what Ram wants. And if we look at our life, right, everything happens from Ram's wish, right? Everything happens through Ram duhai. So even if Hanuman Dada wants to help us, he can't really until Ram gives the order, right? So that's why they say if you want to pray to Hanuman, pray to Ram first, right? Because that's where things are gonna happen faster. So then she is a little convinced, but then she goes, tell me one thing. So how did Vanar and humans become friends? So then he tells the whole story about how they met and things like that. But then she goes, have you seen the the Nisijars, the Rakshasas here? They're very big and they're strong, they're powerful. I'm kind of confused because you're a little this size. So I'm pretty sure after looking at all the Vanaras Ram had, he picked the most strongest Vanar he could find, and he found you. You and then, and she's like, I'm not very sure how this is gonna go. And she goes, More Raday Param Sandeha, meaning not just a little doubt. I have a big doubt about how this is gonna work. And Suni Bachchan Kapi Pragat Keen Nij Deha, right? He then shows himself, he's like, in his head, he's like, she is doubting not me. She's doubting Ram's intelligence that he has created this army which is going to fight against Ravan, and they're not capable of doing it. They're small. So then he shows his own self, right? And they say, Kanak Budara Kar Sharira Samar Bhayankarati Balavira, right? He's almost like a gold mountain that stood up in front of Mata Sita. Mata Sita couldn't even see his head. She could only see his legs. He's that big, right? And he's a Panchmukhi avatar he takes, right? And she's like, okay, I understand. I understand your strength. I understand everything you have, right? And then he take Punila Guru Pavan Sutalina. Again, he comes back to, he shows himself when he has to, but then he comes back to his humble self. He's like, Sunu Mata Sakha Murga, Nahi Bala Buddhi Bisal, Prabhu Pratapate Garudi Khai Paramalagu Byali. Hanumanji says, Mata Sita, it's not me who got bigger. If Prabhu's grace, if Ram's grace can happen to any little snake, he can eat the whole Garud, right? Like it's not about me, it's about Ram. And Ram knows what he's doing. Have faith in Ram. Have faith in Ram's decision. Whatever he's doing for the best. And that's what we have to learn too. Sometimes when things happen, we get depressed, we get anxious, and most time people get suicidal too. And we have to keep in mind that everything is happening because Ram has decided, and Ram has the brain that we don't, right? Maybe we don't see it, but he sees what is the best for us. So he says, have patience, have hope, have faith that Ram has decided what is best for you, and we will take you away, right? This is, have some patience for a month, and we'll come back and get you. And so Mata gets very happy because she gets the contentment, the feeling of peace, and she gives him 5 blessings, right? Balsil, Ajar Amar Gun Nidhi Sutho, right? Meaning you have the best strength of everyone out there. Ajar meaning you remain young. Amar, you're not gonna die. Gunanidhi, you have all the gun you could have. And Ramaji is still standing there like, give me more blessings, give me more blessing, right? And she's like, well, I give him basically everything, right? Ashta Siddhi Navniti Ke Data, right? So she's like, I give him everything, and he's still standing there like he needs more blessings, right? And then she says, oh, and then make sure that Ram has a lot of krupa on you, right? And then he's like, Avakrita kritya bhayo me mata. He's like, now I'm satisfied, Mata. That's all I want. I don't want anything else. I just want to make sure that Ram has his krupa on me. That's all I want. And so then he's thinking, he's like, okay, I did my part. I give her the mudrika. I did the message part. Now he's like, now I gotta do my part, right? So then he's like, Sunu matamu yatishay bhukha lage dekhi sundar phalurukha, right? So he says, Mata, I'm very hungry, right? That's what babies always say to the Mata. And he says, bring me some fruits or something. I want to eat. Or if you allow me, I can go eat some fruits. Ashok Vatika has a lot of fruits, and I'm kind of hungry. So Mata Sita says, Sunusuta Kari Param Rakhwari, Param Supata Rajani Charabhari. She's like, yeah, I could let you go, but the Rakhwari for the protection of Ashokwatika, there's very strong demons out there, and I'm scared. And Hanumanji says, Tin karabai mata mohinahi, jo tum sukh mane hu manmahi. He says, I'm not scared of them. If you think it's okay for me to do it, please let me go eat it. I'm not scared of them. And then Mata Sita says, देखी बुद्धि बल निपुण कपि कहो जान की जाओ रघुपति चरण हृदय धरी तात मधुर फल खाओ, right? She looks at देखी buddhi bal nipun kapi. She sees this kapi full of buddhi and strength. Janki says jao, go. Raghupati Charana, right? Go first, make sure you put your heart, Raghupati Charana Hriday Dhari, put your heart at Raghupati's Charan. Tat Madur Phala, go and eat your fruit, right? Go ahead. She's carefree. She knows he can handle it. So then Tulsidas, right? He goes and starts uprooting the trees. That's not what we talked about. We said we're gonna eat fruits, but now he starts uprooting trees. He's slapping the freaking nisachers, and and he's going and demolishing everything. And then the guards were going to Ravan and they said, "Na the kawa kapi bari te asok bati ka ujari." He's like, there's a kapi who's there and he's just uprooting the trees. And so Ravan is like, come on, let's send army. And so he keeps sending people and he's just killing everybody. Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri Ram, Jai Shri. He's just killing. So no matter what he does, there's always Jai Shri Ram. If he's killing demons, he's saying Jai Shri Ram. If he's eating, he's saying Jai Shri Ram. If he's starting something, he's saying Jai Shri Ram. So that's something else that we have to learn. So then he then also kills Ravan's putra Akshay Kumar, right? And then Meghnad, another son of Ravan, is thinking this puppy isn't gonna be in control. We gotta do something. So then he says, "I'm gonna leave Brahmastra behind him," right? So Hanuman Dada in his head, he's like, if I don't respect Brahmastra, then the Mahima, the value of Brahmastra will be low. So I have to accept this, right? So after Meghnad leaves Brahmastra behind him, Hanmandada gets unconscious. So then Meghnad takes Nagpas and he ties Hanmandada up with Nagpas. And if you look at Sundarkand, you'll know that Sundarkand is actually Shivji saying this story to Mata Bhavani, right? So in this Sundarkand, Tulsidas has written, Jasu nama japi sunahu Bhavani, bhavbandhan kate nargyani, right? The one who recites Ram Nam, there is no way to capture him in any way. So there is no way you can capture him in Brahmaban or Nagpas or anything. Then he says, Tasu dut ki bantawa, that person. So if any random person who says Ram Nam, it's hard to capture him. So if you're talking about his Dut, Ram Dut, right? There's no way you can capture him. So then he says, Prabhu Karajlagi Kapihi Bandawa. He is only there in the Nagpas because he's there to do Ram Kaj. Again, we're going back to the Ram Kaj. So he's doing everything for Ram, right? There's no way to capture Hanumanji. There is no way to capture any of the Ram devotees, right? The only way you can capture them is through Ram Katha. If you know from Bhagavad Gita, I know we talked a little bit about that. They say Krishna was saying Gita to Arjuna,
Yes.
but that Rath is known as Kapidwaj. You know that Hanuman Dada was
Sitting on top of it, yeah.
on the Rath, right? So they say Arjun was only an excuse. Krishna was saying Gita to Hanuman because Hanuman, there's a whole story about it where Hanuman said, I will come help you in the war, in the Kurukshetra, but I cannot live without Ram Katha, or I have to have some kind of Katha. And Krishna said, just come with us to the war because I couldn't win the war against the Ravan
Ramayan.
in Ramayan. How am I gonna win the war against Kauravas here? So I want you to come here. And he's like, well, you gotta promise me that you're gonna tell me Katha. He's like, I'll tell you the Katha, right? So then they say, yes, Krishna was saying Katha to Arjun, but in actuality, he was saying the Katha to Hanuman, who was sitting up there. So that was actually from Hanuman.
So that's the Yada Yada Dharmasya.
The Gita, the whole Gita
The whole
Jnana
Gita,
was
okay.
actually for Hanuman because Hanuman, you cannot capture Hanuman except if you say Ram Nam or Ram Katha. They say wherever you do Ram Katha or Ram Nam, Hanuman is gonna be there. As soon as you stop, he's gonna go, right?
Okay.
Right now he's here listening. He's like, yeah, she's saying it right. Yeah, I'm there. So there's no way to capture him. There's no way to captivate him. The only way you can do it is if you keep reciting Ram Nam or Ram Katha. And that's why we started this episode with Ram Stuti, not Hanuman Stuti, because he's not going to listen to Hanuman Stuti. I can keep doing Hanuman Stuti. And he's like, yeah, go ahead. Ram might listen because, they say in Hanuman Chalisa, if you do Hanuman Chalisa, you can get to Ram. If you're a Hanuman devotee, you can get to Ram. If you're a Ram devotee, you can get to Hanuman. So it's vice versa kind of thing. But so then he takes him into Nagpas and he takes him to Ravan's Sabha. And Hanuman Dada is looking at the whole Sabha. He's like, okay, good. And Ravan in his ego is asking him 6 questions. He's like, I've never seen you before. Who are you? Do I know you? And this and why did you mess with my nisiters? Who are you? And you are not scared of dying? You know I could kill you, right? Like all these things. Hanuman Dada started answering his questions. He answered him back with all 18 answers. Actually, he asked 6 questions, but he answered with 18 answers. The reason is because Hanuman Dada is also an avatar of Shiva, right? And Ravan's guru is Shiv. So Hanuman Dada says, it is my responsibility to make sure that my devotee is on the right path. So he says, I'm going to give you everything you need to be on the right path. So he starts saying everything he could to bring him on the right path, even to the end where he's actually folding his hands, and he's like, I request you, Ravan, let go of Sita. And you can Lanka achala raja tum karo. You can stay in your kingdom, you can do whatever, but if you don't give Sita, man, this is gonna end pretty bad. So he's like, please. But again, when you're an ego, you don't listen to people, right? And in the beginning of this episode, we said start listening to experienced people, then you can decide if it's feasible advice or not. But Ravan never listened to anybody. Even during Sundar Kanda, if we have time, we can go into how Bibhishan is telling him that he needs to let go of Sita. He's giving all his virtues and all his knowledge that he has, and he says, "Let go of Sita, man. Like there's nothing you're gonna gain from it. You're gonna die. Not you. A lot of people are gonna die because of you. So let go of her." But he doesn't listen because of that ego factor. And Hanumanji, on the other hand, even though he's the guru, he listens to everybody he can, and then he does what he thinks is feasible. So that's the difference between Ravan and Hanuman for sure. And then um, Ravan is like, oh, Mila hame kapi gur bad jnani, right? He's like, oh, now I found a guru. You're a kapi, and you're thinking that you're a guru. And then he's like, kapi ke mamata pooch pare. He's the Hanuman Dada, as he's explaining all these, he takes his pooch and he's just doing this, he's like, oh, my pooch, right? Because he's kind of instigating that. So Ravan is like, oh, he loves his pooch. How about we just burn his whole pooch? And Hanuman Dada is a fantastic idea. I love it, right? So he keeps growing his tail more and more. So Ravan asked everybody to donate oil. So everybody donates oil, and the whole kingdom, because the pooch is so big, they put oil on the pooch, and the whole kingdom is empty with oil and ghee and everything. Only Vibhishan didn't donate, right? And we'll come back to this. Everybody donated except Vibhishan, right? So then they're like, okay, this is enough oil and ghee and whatever. Let's go ahead and burn this pooch, right? So then they burn the pooch, and then they say, Pavak Jarata Deki Hanumanta, meaning Hanuman Dada didn't even feel the pooch was burning, right? He actually looked at the tail. Pavak Jarata Deki Hanumanta. He looked at the tail. He's like, oh, it's burning. So then he realized, he's like, oh, now I gotta do, right? Something. So then he again takes Lagurup, he takes Attahasa Karigarja, Kapibare Laga Akas, right? He started going to the sky. He's like, now Ravan, I'll show you who my God is, right? And so he goes Mandir te Mandir Chardhai, right? He goes to each mandir and he starts burning each mandir. He's burning each mandir of Lanka. He doesn't burn Ashok Vatika, right? He also doesn't burn Bibhishan's house. There's two things that he's thinking. He's like, number one, if you're not donating, you're not getting the prasad, right? In the mandir, if you don't donate, you don't get the prasad. And second is like, let's just create a conspiracy theory where Ravan is very analytical, right? So he's gonna think, oh, he burned the whole Lanka except Vibhishan's house, meaning there has to be some connection between Vibhishan and Hanuman. So he'll kick Vibhishan out, right? He wants Vibhishan to be out, and this is what Guru does. This is what Sadguru does, right? A real Guru wants you to be out of the Maya. Initially, when we started talking about Lanka, we said it had jewels and it has Gandharva Kanya and Nag and this and that. All the Maya that you could think about is there. Real Guru, when he sees the real devotee, we also said that when he saw Vibhishan, he's like, Yaha kaha sajjan karbasa, right? So he's like, this is a sajjan Purush. I gotta take this Purush away from this Maya Nagari, right? I gotta make sure he goes to Ram. Because the real Guru takes the devotee from the Maya and takes him to Ram. That's his job. So he's like, I gotta make sure that he goes to Ram. So he planted that seed in Ravan's mind that Vibhishan is something is off with this guy. We gotta take care of this guy, right? So he did that, and after doing that, Pooch bujai koi shrama dhari lagu bahuri janak suta ke aage thad bhayo kar joi, right? After doing everything, he's saying it, he's like, oh, that was a lot of work. And now he's like, now I gotta go back to Mata Sita. I gotta tell her my work is done. I'm gonna go back. So he goes back to Mata Sita and he says, you know, Mata Sita, I'm gonna go back, but is there anything that you would want me to take with me so I can give to Ram and say that this is what we talked about and things like that? So Chuda Mani Utari Tabadayu, she gave the Chuda Mani to Hanuman Dada and says, it felt really nice when I saw you because I was really depressed, and now I have this content, this hope in my heart that everything is gonna be okay. But now that you're going, I'm gonna have again the same days and same nights. I'm gonna be again waiting for the same things again. And Hanuman Dada gives her dheeraj. He gives her patience, right? And he says, everything is going to be okay. I'm going to take your message to Bhagwan Ram and we're going to come back and take you back. All I need from you is have some patience and faith in Ram that everything is going to be okay. And then he goes back, but before he goes back, he does this little garjna, right? Like we talked about, he does the singnad, right? As soon as he did the singnad, he did the garjana. Tulsidas writes that whoever the demons or the Rakshasis were pregnant, they had a miscarriage listening to that garjana, right? So, you know, Bhoot Pisach Nikat nahi aave, Mahavir jab naam sunave, right? So if Nishichars are hearing to that garjana, they're gonna lose their babies and whatever. So they had miscarriages because of that. Then he flies back to where the Vanars were, and they're all happy. Oh, thank God he came back. That means everything is great. Then they say, let's go to Ram and Lakshman and give them the message. So then they go back. And then Jamavant, who initially introduced Hanuman to himself, is now talking about Hanuman to Ram, right? And Jamavant kaha sunu raguraya, Japarnath karo tumadaya, tahi sada subh kusala nirantar, suranare muni prasannata upar, right? So Jamavant says, Sunu raguraya, Ram, listen, whoever you have your grace on, they're always happy. They always, whatever work they do, they're always successful. Sur nar muni prasannata upar. Every sur nar, good people, every sadhu sant, they're always happy on them. They're having grace and blessings. You'll see good people, like all the sadhus are like, "Ah, Bhagwan tera bhala kare," kind of thing, right? So he's saying that, and then he says, पवन सुत कीनी जो करनी सहसा मुख न जाई so burni. He's like, Pavan Sud, whatever Pavan Sud has done, I cannot even tell you with 1,000 mouths because he has done so much. And this is how we feel too, right? Whatever Hanuman Dada does for us, we can't really say it. We can't express it. I have a personal journey that I want to talk about. And I feel that way. The Sasa Mukna Jai So Bernie, there's no way I can express my gratitude. Even Ram later on, when Jamwant has finished his story about how what Hanuman Dada has done and things like that. Ram looks at Hanuman and he says, "Prati upakar karo ka tora sanmukh hoi na saka to manumora." He's like, you have done something, Hanumanji, that no one can ever do. And I don't even know how I'm gonna repay you. Like I can't even look at myself because I can't even repay you. There's a story where, and this is a little sidetrack, but when they're back in Ayodhya and everything is happy, Ram and Sita is sitting on their chairs where they usually sit, and Hanumanji is at Ram's feet, and Ram keeps looking at Hanuman, and then he looks away. Then he looks at Hanuman, and then he looks away, and Hanuman Dada is like, well, he's in love with Ram, so he's just looking at Ram and he's looking at Ram's feet, and so Sita Mata is like, Ram, you're looking at Hanuman. I get it. You love Hanuman, so you keep looking at Hanuman. But why are you looking away? Right? And Ram says, I'm looking at Hanuman when Hanuman is looking at my feet. Okay. But as soon as he looks at me, I can't look at him because I have so much to repay, right? You can't make an eye contact with somebody, you have so much to repay. He's like, I can't even make an eye contact with him because when I look at him and he's looking at my feet, I'm looking at him like my devotee, my son. I love him. But as soon as he looks at me, I can't make an eye contact with him. That's why I look away. So even Ram feels that there's so much that Hanuman has done for him that he can't even repay. And all the Devi Devas, if you look at Hanuman Charitra, right, he has done a lot for a lot of Devi Devas, and everybody keeps saying that there's nothing that they can repay, right? And so then Hanuman tells about Mata Sita. He says, this is she was sad, but Nam Paharu Divas Nisi, right? She keeps reciting your name, Divas Nisi, day and night. She keeps reciting your name. Dhyan Tumar Kapat, your dhyan, your meditation is like a door for her. Nayan Nijpad Jantrita Jai Pran Kehipat, right? Like she is looking at her feet, thinking about your feet. There's no way her soul can leave her body because she's completely devoted to you, right? And so there's a long story, but then after listening to the story, Ram gets sad, he starts tearing up. He's like, oh, Sita is going through a lot of vipati, right? She's going through a lot of problems. And Hanuman says, Vipati Prabhu Soi Jab Tab Sumirana Bhajana Na Hoi, right? He's like, Vipati meaning problem is only when there's no bhajan or your name chanting isn't happening, right? But she is doing all that. So she's not in Vipati, she's just sad, but that is not true. But that's something that struck out to me every single time I do Sundar Kanda. Vipati Prabhu Soi Jabata Vasumirana Bhajan and Hoi, right? And you will hear that. People who don't do bhajan and things like that, and I'm not saying to scare anybody, but if you want to get rid of the intensity of your pain, and the suffering happens from the within, right? Like suffering doesn't happen in the external factors. External factors is just experience, but whatever you feel inside is what you feel inside. And if you have the pain, there is a way to reduce that intensity of the pain is if you start doing bhajans, right? But people don't want to do that and they just want to say, I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad, but just take the medication and you'll be okay. So Hanuman says, Vipati Prabhu soi jab tab sumira na bhajan na hoi. Ketik baat Prabhu jatu dhan ki, ripui jiti ani bhi jaan ki. He says, why are you even worried about the Nisichars and the demons? They're like moths. We're just gonna kill them and bring Janki right back, right? And Ram is looking at Hanuman and he's like, I don't even know what to say to this guy, right? And then Hanuman can feel that he's tearing up. He's looking at himself and he's like, he goes to Ram's feet and he says, Trahi, Trahi Bhagwan, right? Trahi, Trahi, save me, Lord. And that's another line that strikes out for me is that knowingly and unknowingly we do a lot of sins, right? And because of that we're building all these karmas, right? Knowingly or unknowingly, so we have to repay those karmas in one way or another. So the only way to escape that or to reduce the intensity of it is trahi trahi bhagwant, right? Like help me get out of this misery. And then in Sundarkand, Tulsidas says, Ram puts his hand on Hanuman's head and tries to get him up, but he doesn't want to get up, right? He's in so much love that he doesn't want to get up. And then Tulsidas also writes that Shivji is thinking about that moment when, because Shivji is Hanumanji, he's thinking about that moment when Ram's hand was on Hanuman's head and he says, Savadhan manakari punishankar lage kahana katha ati sundar, right? Then he again gets back to his original self and then he gets back into the katha and he continues the story with Mata Parvati. Then Mata Parvati says, this is great devotion that we're talking about, like this conversation. And then they say, whoever listens to this conversation or whoever's heart listens to this conversation will get the bhakti, the devotion for Raghupati's charan, right? Like they'll get that charan. I always had that doubt where, they say you take Ram name or you think about Ram and all your sins will be gone and things like that. When Vibhishan, fast forwarding into Sundarkand, Vibhishan is telling Ravan that, hey, you need to let go of Sita and, let her go to Ram so you can live a happy life where everybody can live a happy life. in ego, he kicks him and he says, "Get out of Lanka." He doesn't only say that, he says, "Go to Ram. That's who you like? Go to Ram." So he shows him the way where to go. So then he goes to Ram. As Vibhishan comes to Ram, all the Vanaras are looking at Vibhishan and they're like, "Oh, this is Ravan's brother." So then Sugriv goes to Ram. He asks Vibhishan to stay here, don't move. And then he goes to Ram and he says, you know, the Ravan's brother is here. And so Ram knows, right? And so Ram looks at Sugriv and he goes, "What do you suggest?" And Sugriv says, Tulsidas writes, "Kahai kapis sunau nar naha," right? Meaning, I'm Kapi, so you are nar, you're human. You don't know anything about demons. This is a demon that came to visit us. Maybe he came to know our secrets. Maybe he came to harm us, right? I suggest we captivate him. And Ram says, "Wonderful. Whoever comes to my sharan, I keep him. I don't let him go," right? And as soon as he says that, Hanuman Dada is happy. He's like, "Oh, Sharanagat Bachal Bhagwana," right? Whoever comes to Ram Sharan, he never goes away. So then this is where I'm thinking where whoever comes to Ram Sharan doesn't go away. And then Ram also says, "Koti Bipra badalagari jau, I saran tajau nahi tau." Meaning, if someone were to kill 1,000 priests and then came to me, I would still not let them go, right? So that's something to think about where you can do anything, you can commit any sin, but then at the end you can just go to Ram and then your sins will be washed away. So that's when my brain was like, what are you trying to say, Ram? And then he says, Sanmukh hoi jeev mohi jabhi janma koti agnasahi tabhi. Meaning if the soul is facing me, janma koti agnas, janma koti, 1,000 lives of sins and karmas are gone right there, right? पापवंत कर सहज सुभाव भजन मोर ते ही भाव न काऊ जो पे दुष्ट हृदय सोई होई मोरे सन्मुख आव की सोई. Then he asked, he's like, but if his heart had any kind of evil, any kind of dirt, do you think he would come to me or he would even recite my name? Which then was striking to me. I'm like, oh, okay, he's right. Even if you kill 1,000 priests and then go to him, he will spare you and he'll forgive you and accept you and love you. But you won't find it in your heart to say Ram's name. It's really hard to say Ram's name. It's hard. It's easy to do everything else, but to sit there and say Ram, 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 right? So then it makes sense. I'm like, yes. He says, Nirmal man jan so mohi pava, mohe kapat chal chidra na bhava, right? He's like, if your heart is pure, then only you can find me. If you have any greed, lust, ego, whatever, you can't even think about me, right? Uh, and then he talks about if Ravan has sent him for any secret mission or whatever, we can still take care of him. But it makes sense that you cannot take Ram's name if you are that bad of a person. Even they say when you die during the period of death, before death, if you say God's name, you won't go to hell, right? They say, sadhu sants will say, just say Ram once and you won't even see Yamraj's face. You'll just go straight to wherever, heaven. And I've always thought that I could do whatever sin, and at the end, I'll just say Ram and I'll be spared. But it's all about habit. If I'm not in the habit of saying Ram, 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 you think when I'm dying, I'll be thinking about Ram? Right? Like, right. I have to be in the habit to do something. I have to sing Sundar Kanda once a week, twice a week, thrice a week, whatever, to be in the habit for my mind to think about Sundarkand. Because if I'm not in that zone, if I go to bar every day and listen to Miley Cyrus every day, I don't think Sundarkand is gonna come to my head, right? When I'm dying. That's I have to create that memory in my brain. So I initially I had some doubts, but then the more I did Sundarkand, the more it got cleared up. And then on the other hand, Mandodari was also talking to Ravan and saying, "Let it go, let Sita go to Ram." He's still not listening. there are other Nisachars, and there was the talk of the town saying, if the Ram Dut, who was just a Dut, who came and burned and did all these destruction, imagine when Ram comes. This is just a simple Dut that we're talking about did all this. Now imagine what's going to happen when Ram comes, right? So everybody's trying to convince Ravan, please give Sita back, but he's not listening. On the other hand, Vibhishan is accepted by Ram. He does the Ram Tilak, and Ram says, "What do you suggest? How do I build any bridge or anything? How do I ask the Samudra to let my army go to the other side?" And Vibhishan says, "How about we just request to the Samudra to let us go?" And Ram says, "Wonderful. Let's start with the request." So he requests the Samudra, doesn't listen. They say, Gaye teen din beeti. 3 days have passed. Bole Ram sakop tab bhai binu hoye na preeti. Ram is like, without fear, there is no love, is there, right? There is no respect without fear. So then he looks at Lakshman and he says, Lakshmana ban sarasara anu, so barik bisik krisanu. He's like, I'm going to show this Samudra who I am, right? Like, he is furious. He's like, you can't do Ram Katha or you can't do Hari Katha to somebody who's full of greed and lust and ego. You can't really convince a stubborn person to do something. So then, as he's tying his bow and arrow, all these fish and crocodiles and all these creatures start dying, and they're asking, begging for help. And so the Samudra was like, "Oh no, I made a mistake," right? So then he takes Sadhurup again. He comes with a gold plate, and he is saying, Shamaunat Saba Avgun Mere. He's asking for forgiveness, and again Ram forgives him. And then he says, Nal and Neel are the two Vanars who are blessed to have the Ram Setu built, and they're gonna touch the Pathar and they're gonna be floating on the river because of your name and your grace. So anything else I can do for you? Yes, with your grace, I can actually go dry. That's what you want, and yeah, that could happen too. But whatever you want, Ram, is gonna happen. And Ram says, you know what? No, that's fine. Nal and Nil can make the setu, and we can go on the other end. And that's where Sundarkand ends. And Tulsidas writes, Sakal Sumangaladayaka Raghunayaka Gurgan, Sadar Sunahi Te Tarigi Bhava Sindhu Bina Jaljan. Meaning you don't even have to sing Sundarkand or understand Sundarkand. If you do, that's great. But whoever listens to it, and they don't even say humans, they say whoever listens to it will be going through Bhava Sindhu, right? With the life, and they'll attain the enlightenment and they'll attain the nirvana without even trying. So that's where I would like to end Sundarkand.
That was
What do you think?
that was lovely. Sheesh, I still have I had goosebumps the entire time. I think I'm tearing up too. But there is so much to learn. Like the entire journey, essentially for me, it kind of represents the journey of life, where you may achieve accolades, you may achieve all this knowledge, intelligence, whatever, right? But like showboating may not be your best approach. Like even like the Angad story where he says like even though I'm Vali's son, I can make that one trip, but I might not be able to make it back, which I feel represents like somebody trying to say like do fake it till you make it, like just faking like I can do this, but I'm just choosing or just finding ways to for you to reject that idea. But then for me, for my ego, I can say I could do it, but just because you said not to do it, I did not do it. Or just because you did not want this or you did not want that, and shift the entire blame on you. So that's what I guess like the Angad's part. That's how it resonates to me. Whereas like Hanumanji was basically sitting, meditating, chanting, just like I'm okay. Like I don't have to show off. Like if somebody else wants to do it, they can do it, as long as the deed is done. I'm okay with it. I don't have to show who I am, or I don't have to, personally be responsible for this. But when somebody asks you for help, then sure, like if you have the ability, along with taking experiences and learnings from experienced people, and then using that along with whatever in combination together to go across the ocean, which is technically your life, right? And you will, like, based on what you said about the mountain, offering all these good things to Hanumanji, and him saying thank you but no thank you, and then fighting like this demon at the end, kind of talks about like your obstacles could be your friends or your foes. It's not just only your foes, but even your friends have the ability to distract you. So um, even though that's a good thing, and on a different day that might be a good idea, but if you are on a journey to achieving something, or if you have a goal in mind, you might not want to then get distracted with these small worldly pleasures, for lack of a better word. And then like, you would definitely find like things that go against you, but as long as you have your eyes set on your target, you will eventually get there, um, with all your dedication, meditation, whatever. So that was one part of that journey. The other part that struck.
I would like to add
Sure.
to that. So when we're talking about other Vanaras and Angad, when you're mentioning that fake it till you make it kind of mentality, um, for me, it's more like there's three types of people that we deal with, and one type is they keep saying things. I'll do this. I'll do that, and there's no action. There's only words. There's no actions. Then there's second type of people where there's words and actions. They'll say, I'll do this, and they'll prove it. They'll do it. So there were Angad falls under that category where he actually means it, that he will go, but he might not be able to come back. There's a story associated with it because there was some kind of shot that was given to him and Akshay Kumar that if they both see each other, one is gonna die. We don't know who. So Angad is like, I can go, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to survive if I see Akshay Kumar. Or I don't even know if I'm gonna have enough strength to make it back, even if I'm alive, right? And the third type of person is the one who doesn't say anything and just does it, just does shows the action, and that's where Hanuman falls under, where he's just showing, right? So there is fake it till you make it kind of people who doesn't have anything but only want to speak, and have no fruits whatsoever. So I agree with you.
Okay. Okay. So that was like part of Hanuman's journey, that kind of struck as a big learning portion. The other part is Vibhishan. So the way it's described is there's this Lanka, this Lanka made out of gold with gemstones and so many beautiful things around it, and then in the middle of all of that is Vibhishan's castle, where he is like totally separated from all of these worldly things. Or as we know, like, even though Ravana is described as like a negative character in this story, he still was a big Shiv devotee. He had these great accolades in terms of like administration and stuff like that, which Ram actually asked Lakshman to learn. So at some point, like, even though he may have some good qualities, but he, like, there are a lot of things that kind of go against him based on his decisions. So even between all of that, even in this Soneki Lanka, or like this golden Lanka, he's still in the middle, away, trying to keep himself away from every possible Maya, or like every possible temptation, which is also something that kind of struck me. And my favorite part is when Hanumanji is like flying away, and he sees the burning Lanka, like he sees the burning gold Lanka, which is essentially the burning down of Ravana's ego, right? Which is like a fantastic lesson.
I want to add a lot of things to
Sure.
So Ravan had everything. He was one of the greatest pundits that we have had. He was I would, in this generation, we should call him a PhD in Sanskrit, right? Like he wrote Shiv Tandav Stotram, and he was a big pundit. He knew a lot of things. He had everything that you could possibly think about. Um, Let it be money, fame. He had Sawa lakh put, right? He had a lot. His half of his army was his own sons and grandsons, right? So he had everything. The only thing that brought him down was his ego, right? So they say, how do you spot that this person is going to fall down? A successful person is going to fall down is if he has the ego. So he had everything, and then on top of that, he added that ego factor. So then, of course, he was going to fall down. He lost that humbleness. On the other hand, when you mentioned that Vibhishan was in the middle of the Maya and he was just doing Ram Ram, this is where our generation comes to play, right? We are in the middle of Maya. There's a lot going on around us. And if we still choose to do Ram Ram, Hanumanji will find you and will like, Lanka Nisicharnika Nivasa, yahan kahan sajjan kar pasa, right? And he will come and give you the Guru Gnan that he wants to give you, right? So for me, Hanumanji plays that role where I don't know anything. There's different marks that you can find in devotion. You can find Gnan mark where you look for the truth. You're looking for that. That's what Gautama Buddha did, right? He was going in that path to get that knowledge. There's other path where you just do complete devotion. I don't know what's right, what's wrong. I'm just gonna chant the name and things will come to me. So I think this route is a little bit easier where all you have to do is chant the Ram Nam and even though you're around that Maya, you feel separated from it. You kind of don't feel like you belong there. And when that happens, it's hard. Like Vibhishan says, it feels like you're the tongue that resides between 32 teeth because you'll have peer pressure too, right? We live in America. We have friends where people are going to ask you to come drinking with us, come to clubbing. You're so boring. You don't do anything. This is not the age to do Ram Ram, right? You hear from family and friends. This is not the age. Well, what is the right age then, right? You don't know when I'm gonna die. Nobody knows who's gonna die when. So I wanna earn the Ram name before I die, right? So when I keep reciting Ram Nam, hopefully one day Hanumanji will be like, oh, Lankani se charni karni wasa, yahan kahan sajjan kar basa, right? So that is one thing that does strike out for me that Vibhishan was living in Lanka yet separated from it. And then later on in Sundar Kanda, I forgot to mention it, um, Ram gives Vibhishan all the sampati, all the property that Shiva gave Ravan, right? So even though he separated himself from it and he didn't want anything but Ram's Sharan, right? We didn't go into that whole chapter, but one point Vibhishan says, Ram Satya Sankalpa Babu, Sabha Kal Bastori, Main Raghubir Sharan Ab Jao Dev Kari Jodi, right? He leaves Lanka, he leaves everything, and he goes to Ramcharan. When he goes to Ramcharan, Ram actually gives him all the kingdom and all the property and everything that Ravan has. And then when Ravan dies, of course, he gets the kingdom again. So when you separate yourself from the Maya, from the illusion, it doesn't mean that you're gonna lose everything. It's actually you're gonna get everything, but in a better way. Ravan had everything and he lost it because of his ego and him being so entangled into the Maya. Whereas Vibhishan left everything and everything came to him. He didn't even have to go ask for it. So yes, it does strike out and I love that part.
So you're like basically practicing detachment rather than
Exactly.
being too attached to worldly things and materialistic things.
Love it.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Thank you for giving me the katha. And from today onwards, you're also now one of my gurus. So thank you very much. And I would like to actually end this with a Hanuman Chalisa, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
Please.
Let's start. श्री गुरु चरण सरोज रज निज मन मुकुर सुधार बरनउँ रघुबर बिमल जसु जो दायक फल चार बुद्धिहीन तनु जानिके सुमिरो पवन कुमार बल बुद्धि विद्या देहु मोहि हरहु कलेस विकार जय हनुमान ज्ञान गुण सागर जय कपीस तिहु लोक उजागर, रामदूत अतुलित बल धामा, अंजनी पुत्र पवन सुत नामा, महावीर विक्रम बजरंगी, कुमति निवार सुमति के संगी, कंचन वरन विराज सुबेसा, कानन कुंडल कुंचित केसा, हाथ वज्र और ध्वजा विराजे, कांधे मूंज जनेऊ साजे, शंकर स्वयं केसरी नंदन, तेज प्रताप महाजगवंदन, विद्यावान गुणी अति चातुर, राम काज करिबे को आतुर, प्रभु चरित्र सुनिबे को रसिया, राम लखन सीता मन बसिया, सूक्ष्म रूप धरि सियहि दिखावा, बिकट रूप धरि लंक जरावा, भीम रूप धरि असुर संहारे, रामचंद्र के काज सवारे, लाए सजीवन लखन जियाए, श्री रघुवीर हर्षि उर लाए, रघुपति कीन्ही बहुत बढ़ाई, तुम मम प्रिय भरतहि सम भाई, सहस्त्र बदन तुमरो यश गावै, अस कहि श्रीपति कंठ लगावे, सनकादिक ब्रह्मादि मुनीसा, नारद सारद सहित अहिसा, जम कुबेर दिगपाल जहाते, कवि कोविद कहि सके कहाते, तुम उपकार सुग्रीवहि कीन्हा, राम मिलाय राजपद दीन्हा, तुमरो मंत्र विभीषण माना, लंकेश्वर भय सब जग जाना, जुग सहस्त्र जो जन पर भानु, लील्यो ताहि मधुर फल जानु, प्रभु मुद्रिका मेली मुख माही, जलधि लांघि गए अचरज नाही, दुर्गम काज जगत के जेते, सुगम अनुग्रह तुम्हरे तेते, राम दुआरे तुम रखवारे, होत न आज्ञा बिनु पैसारे, सब सुख लहे तुम्हारी शरणा, तुम रक्षक काहू को डरना, आपन तेज सम्हारो आपै, तीनों लोक हाँकते कापै, भूत पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे, महावीर जब नाम सुनावे, नासे रोग हरे सब पीरा, जपत निरंतर हनुमंत बीरा, संकट ते हनुमान छुड़ावे, मन क्रम बचन ध्यान जो लावे, सब पर राम तपस्वी राजा, तिनके काज सकल तुम साजा, और मनोरथ जो कोई लावे, सोई अमित जीवन फल पावे, चारों जुग परताप तुम्हारा, है प्रसिद्ध जगत उजियारा, साधु संत के तुम रखवारे असुर निकंदन राम दुलारे। अष्ट सिद्धि नौ निधि के दाता असबर दीन जानकी माता। राम रसायन तुम्हरे पासा सदा रहो रघुपति के दासा। तुम्हारे भजन राम को पावे जन्म जन्म के दुख बिसरावे। अंत काल रघुवरपुर जाई जहाँ जन्म हरि भक्त कहाई। और देवता चित्त न धरई हनुमत से सर्व सुख करई। संकट कटे मिटे सब पीरा जो सुमिरै हनुमंत बलबीरा। जय 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 हनुमान गोसाई कृपा करहु गुरुदेव की नाई। जो सत बार पाठ कर कोई छूटहि बंदी महा सुख होई। जो यह पढ़े हनुमान चालीसा होय सिद्धि साखी गौरीसा। तुलसीदास सदा हरि चेरा कीजे नाथ हृदय मह डेरा। पवन तनय संकट हरन मंगल मूर्ति रो। राम लखन सीता सहित हृदय बसहु सुरहु।
Thank you so much. Thank you again for coming on this episode.
Thank you.